welcome back to another video. You guys, today I'm really feeling like I want to challenge myself for the new year. It is officially January and I'm very excited to kind of jump into some new books for the month of January and for 2024. This video I'm going to be reading for 24 hours. I'm going to really try to challenge myself to get through 2 books. I am not going to read for an entire day of 24 hours, but I will keep track on my phone and set a timer. And anytime I need to go to work or do errands or chores or anything like that, then I will stop the timer and then pick it up again. There are 2 books that I'd like to get through for this challenge, and the first one is Fairy Tale by Stephen King. I actually have this on my Kindle and I've already started to read through it. I'm on page 231 out of 600. I'm a little over a third of the way through by this point. I've never read anything by Stephen King before, and I really wanted to challenge myself with it being the new year and just diving into some different authors that I haven't really considered before. Stephen King has written a lot of books, you guys, and most of his well-known works are more of the horror genre. Fairy Tale is actually a fantasy mystery book, so I think it's a really good way to dip my toe into Stephen King without getting the creepy, spooky horror types of vibes that you would normally get from him. He's a really good storyteller. I really like his writing style. So in Fairy Tale, we are following the story of Charlie. Charlie lives with his father. He's a single dad. And Charlie ends up befriending this neighbor on their street who's an elderly man. And Charlie basically saves his life. You know, this old man falls down and hurts himself. So Charlie takes him to the hospital and they form this really great friendship and this really close bond. And from that, Charlie becomes this old man's caretaker and looks after his house and his dog. And there's a lot of mysteries about this old man. No one really seems to know how he's gotten his money. There's a little bit of speculation that he could have been a criminal in a previous life. There's just a lot of unknowns about where he came from, who he is, why he retired. No one really knows that much about him. They just picture this old man as this cranky neighbor that all the kids are afraid of. What ends up happening is Charlie takes care of this old man and he passes away and leaves his entire estate and wealth and his dog to Charlie because Charlie became his closest companion in the later years of his life. Charlie then basically is left wondering, what do I do with this house? He's a senior in high school and really wants to go off to college. He's being pressured by his dad to kind of go that route. However, there's so much mystery and intrigue around this property and this house, and Charlie really wants to stay and kind of uncover some of the unanswered questions about this old man. So that's kind of where we're at in the book so far. I don't want to spoil too much of the book in case you haven't read it yet. It is a newer Stephen King novel, and I think it's one of the novels that's a little bit less in the favorites, but still is very, very popular right now. So I won't dive in too much more in terms of a summary or spoilers per se. I'll give you guys my review at the end of the 24 hours. So we'll see how far I get. Like I said, I'm a third of the way through the Stephen King novel, and yeah, in 24 hours I would definitely expect to finish that. I do have a second book that I want to get through, and I'll introduce that once we finish up with Stephen King's Fairy Tale. So let's get reading, guys. Hey guys, so I am officially a little over 3 hours into this 24-hour reading challenge. Maybe you can see, but basically I'm 3 hours and 22 minutes into this reading challenge, and I've been reading through Fairy Tale by Stephen King. Fairy Tale is actually one of Stephen King's fantasy novels, and to be honest, it's been a little bit slow. I think I had higher expectations going into it. The story isn't really picking up until at the point where I'm at now. I'm at 61% of the way through the book. I'm on chapter 21 out of 32. I am reading it on my Kindle as well as listening to the audiobook, and I actually really like the audiobook. The guy who does the narration has a really captivating voice. He does a really good job with differentiating between the different characters, and I really, really enjoy listening to it. So I've kind of been going that route for the last day or so, getting through this book. It's just been easier for me to kind of get through some of my chores and put it like on the background, and then I've been picking up my Kindle here and there when I feel like it. So I'm kind of at that point in the book where things are starting to get a little bit more sticky. Our main character Charlie has kind of caught himself in a little bit of a predicament, so I have a little bit higher expectations for the rest of the book at this point. We're coming to the main challenge the hero Charlie, our main character, needs to overcome. So I'm hopeful that the rest of this book kind of picks up where the first half was a little bit slow and I felt like I was just sludging my way through it. It didn't really seem to do it that much for me, but I really want to give this book a try. If I were to rate it at this point in time, I think I'd probably leave it at like 2.5 to 3 stars. I'm not super impressed by any means, but perhaps that will change once I get through this, through the rest of the book. So I think I'm going to keep listening to the audiobook while I am doing chores. It is Sunday. This is the day where I meal prep, do the laundry, things like that. So I think I'm just going to keep it on in the background and listen to it. And hopefully I should be able to finish this, I think in like a day or two, and then we'll jump into the next book and just kind of see how I'm doing on time. Maybe I'll have time for a third book, but at this point I think I'm going to be able to finish Fairy Tale and then jump into one more and kind of wrap up the week that way. So let's jump back into the challenge and get reading, and let's start our timer. Can we have a truth moment, okay, about this book? There's just so much in my mind right now. We need to talk, okay? Stephen King. That is what we need to talk about right now. So when we last left off, right, I literally was just a little bit through 3 hours-ish into the 24-hour reading challenge. At this point, not a lot of time has passed. My timer is set at 4 hours and 45 minutes, and I've literally sat on the same spot on the couch binging this book. What has happened? Like, Stephen King, he literally, I feel like I got played, but I got played in the best possible way. The first 300 pages of this book is a big setup. It feels like a prologue, honestly, where you're following Charlie, we're hearing his backstory, we're getting to know him as a character, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm not really somebody who will gravitate towards, like, a character-driven book. I am very plot-driven. We are at the point in the book now where it is very plot-driven, and I am absolutely obsessed. I love the journey that the story has taken. There is this, like, so the title definitely makes sense, right? Because it's called Fairy Tale, and there's definitely elements of the story that, like, guide you towards that way, like, fantasy-wise. Like, we have our main hero, Charlie. He's put in a very sticky predicament. He has to rise up to the occasion and serve the interest of others above his own. That's very much like a fairy tale-esque type of a trope, and I love it. It's so good. Like, where was this like 300 pages ago, Stephen King? Like, what in the goodness? I'm so distressed. And I honestly like was not prepared to like film this. I took all my makeup off. I was like literally probably just gonna finish like one more chapter and then go to bed. But I'm on page 426 out of 600 and I can't put this down. Like, it is so good. And I'm so mad. I shouldn't be mad. I shouldn't be mad. This is a good book. The rating is probably gonna be very interesting because I'm on an emotional roller coaster right now. I love this book. I hate this book. It's boring. It's exciting. I'm happy. I'm sad. Like, literally, it just feels like a giant, like, roller coaster of emotions that this book has, like, taken me on. And I'm kind of mad. I'm mad. And you can be mad at me for it. If you've read this book, please reply in the comments. Like, did you feel this way when you read this book? Like, did Stephen King get you like he got me? I really thought the direction of the story was going to be so boring. It was just gonna, like, I don't know, maybe have a happy ending or just kind of like go along the way of being like a so-so meh kind of a read. I honestly have no idea now. I just need to keep reading it and find out like what happens to Charlie and his situation, and if he ends up like becoming the man of the hour is basically what's happening right now. And I'm at 70%. High stakes right now, high fantasy, high stakes right now. Before it was just general fiction. The story tone has changed dramatically from the first 300 pages, which was pretty much just like a general fiction story, and now it is very gripping. So yeah, I'm gonna stop talking about this book and I'm just gonna read it. And then at the end, I'll give you my final rating at the end of this reading challenge. I don't think I'm gonna be able to like give a solid review and rating once I put it down. I think I need to marinate in it and sit in it in a few days because it's just been so compelling. But it's also, like I said, like been a really big roller coaster. Like, I don't know how to feel about it. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. I wasn't really anticipating to film anymore tonight, but here we are because you guys just need to know. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking and I'm gonna get back to reading. Hey guys, so I have officially finished Fairy Tale by Stephen King. I actually finished it a couple days ago, and I feel like I have such emotional whiplash from that book. It was all over the place for me, but in the best possible way. I have not rated it yet on Goodreads. I think I'm gonna hold off for a couple of days. I need to let it sink in and kind of see how my perception of it changes in the next few days. But I do want to go ahead and jump into the next book. So the next book that I'm going to read for this 24-hour reading challenge is Hello Beautiful by Ann Napolitano. This book was chosen for my book club book. It is a literary fiction book, and I don't really know much more than the fact that it's about family relationships and some of the messy things that happen within siblings. And that's about all I know at this point. So I want to make sure that I can get through this one. Let's look at the timer and see how much time has passed already. So I have already gone through 9 hours and 2 minutes of this 24-hour reading challenge. I don't know if you can see this or not with the glare. So yeah, we're almost at the halfway point. So I might be able to get through 3 books in this challenge, which is really exciting. But I'm gonna go ahead and set the timer and we can get into reading Hello Beautiful by Ann Napolitano. I can't wait to see what this is about and yeah, kind of talk about it with my book club later this month. So let's get reading and start the timer. It's been a few hours and I have been sitting and reading Hello Beautiful by Ann Napolitano. I think the last time that we spoke I was a little over 9 hours into the reading challenge, and now I'm 11 hours and 15 minutes. Hopefully you can see this, maybe not with the glare. But this is a literary fiction. This book was chosen for my book club's book of the month, and I'm kind of glad that we picked it because we haven't really read any literary fiction like as a group. And for me personally, this isn't a genre that I've explored that much into. So as part of this challenge, I'm really glad that I'm starting to read some genres that I normally wouldn't gravitate towards. I'm about a third of the way through the book. I'm on page like 114 and we're almost 400-ish pages for the total book. And there's a couple things that have happened that are very interesting. I can tell that the plot is starting to build at this point. A lot of the characters, we're following multiple POVs from this family of sisters, as well as a husband to one of the sisters. A lot of the sisters are very morally, they're not morally corrupt, but they're just very delusional because they're so young. I think the oldest sister of the four is like early 20s, maybe like 21, 22. And then the youngest are twins, and I think they just finished like high school. So they're all very, very close in age. However, they're like, I don't know. It just seems like they have very fanciful ideas, but a lot of them are very drastic. Like one of the sisters is very like controlling and commanding and wants things to like be perfect and to be like the boss and the leader. We have one sister who's like very artistic, one that's like super emotional, and then we have one that's more of like a supporting sister who will just like want to help anyone who's like in need. So they're all kind of like different in their own ways, but they all have very distinct flaws. So perhaps as we get further into the story, maybe more drama will like ensue between the sisters. There's not a whole lot like between all four of them at this point, but there is some drama like between other family members. I won't like spoil the plot or anything like that if you want to read this book. Yeah, it's interesting. It's not my favorite by any means. However, I am enjoying the writing style. I really like the concept of the book. So perhaps there's like really good potential for this to like get more dramatic, or maybe more things will begin to happen that will like pull me towards a different rating. If I had to rate it right now, I'd probably give it like 3 stars. This is solid 3. So yeah, we'll keep reading. I'm gonna set the timer and we'll get back into the challenge. It's been a couple days since I've updated you on my reading journey with Hello Beautiful. This is a literary fiction novel set in Chicago during the 70s and 80s, and kind of even beyond that. We're following multiple POVs in the story. There is a family with 4 sisters, so we're kind of hearing from each of the sisters different perspectives, as well as a husband to one of the sisters. We're kind of getting his narrative as well. This book reads a lot like a soap opera drama sort of story. All of the characters are very delusional. I'm having a really hard time rooting for one of the characters. You know, sometimes when you read a fiction book, you really want like a certain event to happen for the character. You want to see them win. I don't particularly like any of the characters in this book. I think they're all delusional. They all have moral issues. They are all basically trauma bonded in a way. It just got so messy. And when I was reading this, it just, you know, it just kind of makes me wonder like why do authors decide to write dark stuff like this? Like this is definitely not something that I would pick up and want to read in my own free time. I probably would DNF it if it wasn't the fact that this is my book club book. And the writing is beautiful. I will say that. The writing style is really beautiful. I really like some elements between the characters, but it's kind of down. The mood in this is kind of dark. It's really sad. There's just a lot of drama between the characters. There's drama like with the characters in their own like personal selves. It's just very dramatic, and it's not something that is my favorite. I don't know if all literary fiction is this wild and bizarre. Comment down below if you really enjoy literary fiction, or if there are some literary fiction books that are a little bit more upbeat and uplifting. So I'm on page 302 out of 380 or so. So I'm going to pick this back up and kind of finish reading through it. At this point in the 24-hour reading challenge, I am 14 hours and 38 minutes into the challenge. So I think I'll be able to finish this one today, and then we could maybe move on to something a little bit more uplifting, or maybe just go in a different direction. I think this one's probably going to put me into a reading slump just because it's so sad. It's not so much as it being like dark and sinister, but it's just like dark in the sense that it's like really depressing and really sad, and there's just like none of the characters I feel relatable to. I don't really want to root for any of the characters, so it's just kind of like a meh kind of a book. I don't think I would recommend this to a friend, let me just put it that way. So yeah, I'm just gonna finish this so I can just move on to something else, honestly. Like, I just kind of want this to be off my plate at this point. Today is a great day because I am officially done with Hello Beautiful, and we are over 17 hours into this 24-hour reading challenge. I am so glad to have Hello Beautiful off my plate. It just became so sad and so depressing that like towards the end, I was just like, I just want the pages to be done and over with at this point. Like, what a sad book. It really drained me. I didn't like any of the characters. The plot was just really depressing. And it's not really like, you know, usually when I read, I'm reading to have like escapism. I want to have a very like engaging story. I want to feel either related to the characters or just have a character that's like so different from me that it's like inspiring. This book didn't feel inspiring at all. It just felt kind of down. And I'm just glad to return this back to the library. That's why it's so shiny. I'm really thankful I didn't buy this. I don't think I'd recommend it. And so for that reason, I ended up giving it 2.5 stars. I'm just gonna go ahead and give you my rating now instead of at the end, because I'm just so sure about this rating. It's gotta be 2.5 stars. Like, the writing is beautiful. The author herself, Ann Napolitano, is, I think she used to work for like a literary fiction or a literary house or magazine of some kind. So her writing is very beautiful. I will give her that. Like, you can tell that she definitely knows what she's doing with her prose. It's just the character development. I was just kind of like, ugh. It just left a bad taste in my mouth, and I was like, great, I'm done with this, and now I can read something that I actually want to read and I will actually enjoy. So, since we are 17 hours into this reading challenge, that really dictates what type of book I can read and kind of finish this 24 hours with. I have a couple of thrillers on my shelf, and there's one that I really wanted to read. I think this is going to really pull me out of my reading slump and give me a taste of something else that's a little bit more exciting. And the book that we've decided to go with is The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. I love Riley Sager. I read The Only One Left by him in the fall, right around Halloween time, and it was fantastic. His writing is very gripping, it's very fast-paced, there's a lot of really good plot twists that kept me reeling in that book. So I'm really excited to jump into this one and give another one of his books in his backlog another try. The House Across the Lake, I actually did start this last night. Really, as soon as I finished Hello Beautiful, I was like, next one please. Like, we need to move on before I sit in it for too long and feel so sad. This one is perfect to get me out of this. You guys, it is really gripping so far. Like, we are immediately thrown into our main character. So our main character, Casey, she is an actress, and she's going through a really tough time in her life. She is basically an alcoholic now, and becomes entangled in some of this like drama with paparazzi catching her drinking during the day, like in public. So her agent and her mother send her to the family lake house for like a month or so, and the like sad thing about this lake house is that that's where Casey's husband had passed away. He like drowned in the lake. And so she really has a lot of qualms about staying here. It's a little bit depressing to her because there's a lot of like ghosts from her past that she feels like are attached to this place. But it gets so interesting because there's this really wealthy family that just moved in the super nice house across the lake, and she can see through their windows from her like back porch area, and she's been like spying on them and like drinking bourbon like on her porch. And she ends up saving her neighbor's wife. The wife was like swimming in the lake, and because she's like Casey's like spying on them, she's like, oh, what's that? Realizes it's a person, and then goes and saves the wife. And so now she and the wife are like this. They're like really good friends. And I'm really excited to see where this is gonna go. I'm on page 94, you guys. I love his writing style. You can just fly through these books, and I'm on page 94 out of 349, 350. So I'm definitely going to be able to finish this for the reading challenge. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pick up another book after this for the 24 hours and be able to like actually get through something, but I'll probably be able to like at least start something. We'll see how far along we get. If we hit like 23 hours into the reading challenge and I finish this book, I don't think I'm going to pick up another one. But if I finish at like 20 hours, I do have a couple other thrillers like on my shelf that I could probably pull and maybe read a fourth book for the 24-hour reading challenge. I'm excited to give this a read. I'm so thankful that we're going in a different direction. I think this is really going to help me get out of that like depressed mood that I was in from Hello Beautiful. Definitely would recommend it. But this one so far, holy crap, like I'm obsessed with it so far. So let's get into it. Insane. It was so good and so intense. I ended up finishing this at a coffee shop this morning, and I literally stayed at the coffee shop until I finished it around like lunchtime. It was so good. The plot was amazing, and basically just to like recap what went on in like this whole storyline. So we're following Casey. Casey is a washed up actress basically. She's on a hiatus right now because she got involved with some drama with drinking in public, and then the paparazzi like caught her, and then there was like issues with the tabloids kind of like tainting her image basically. So she ends up going to this lake house that's owned by her family and kind of hides away there while the drama like calms down. And while she's there, like first chapter, she meets this very wealthy family that moves across the lake to this house that she can basically like see through and like spy on. The wife of the couple goes for a swim and almost drowns. So Casey sees her while she's spying and then goes and rescues the wife. And then she and the wife kind of start this like basic friendship with one another. They're pretty close at the beginning, but then drama and crazy stuff starts to happen. Casey begins to suspect that the husband of the couple is like out to kill his wife because she keeps spying on them. So because Casey has a drinking problem, she's not very like credible and reliable because she starts to report this stuff to the police, right? Because she suspects that the husband of the couple is basically out to kill his wife, and the detectives and the cops like involved are basically like, well, you're like drunk all the time, like don't really know if I believe what you're saying. And there's also a couple other neighbors that are like within walking distance of her like lake house that she forms this like friendship and bond with, and then all three of them basically get like entrapped into the drama. But Casey, we are definitely following her perspective the most throughout this book, and it's really cool because there's like dual timelines going on here. So we're getting like glimpses from like before and then like stuff that's happening now, and it's really cool like how he laid this out in the story. Let me just show you real quick. So we have like before, which is really cool with these like photos, now, and we get like the timeline of like what's occurring like right then and there. I love his writing. A House Across the Lake, cannot say enough good things about this book. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars on Goodreads. It was a very easy rating to give just because it was just so quick and easy to get through. And then also the story was so dramatic, but in the best way possible. And I will say there is a little bit of like a horror element to the story, but don't let that deter you from reading this book. It's definitely worth the hype. And Riley Sager is a beloved author because he's just good at writing thrillers, and there's a reason for that. So would definitely recommend this book to any and all people. So because I flew through that book so quickly, you guys, I'm looking at my timer right now. We are at 20 hours and 9 minutes into this 24-hour reading challenge. I have finished 3 books, which is actually really surprising to me. I thought I was only going to be able to get through 2 of them, let alone 3. I do have other thrillers on my bookcase that I could go and get and start another thriller for this reading vlog, but I think I just want to keep all the books for this 24-hour reading challenge very random and all over the place, just to make it a little bit more fun and interesting. I already read a fantasy, I read a thriller, I read a literary fiction book, so now I think it's time that we read a really cute romance, and I have one picked out on my Kindle already, so I'm so excited to share this with you guys. So this book that I ended up finding is called Best Served Hot. Great title. By Amanda Elliott. So Best Served Hot, we are following 2 different like food critics in New York City in current day, and they're basically like rivals with one another, and it's really hard to become a food critic in New York City, so they're kind of like fighting on the same turf, if you will. The main character, the girl, I believe her name is Julia. We're following one POV in the story, which is Julia. She's the main food critic in here, and she ends up like losing a job to this like rival food critic, and she has this like general perception of him being this like wealthy rich guy from like old New York money who like swoops in and like takes her like food critic job that she's like so wanting and desiring to have in her life. And so she just like has it from the get-go to like hate on this guy, and they end up meeting at this like food festival and cause this big scene where they're just like fighting with one another, and he's basically calling her like a fake and like a poser because she just takes pictures of food and doesn't like really review them, and then she calls him like old and outdated because all of his food reviews are in like a newspaper. So it's just like kind of funny and like quirky to have a little bit of a rom-com with the enemies to lovers trope. I love that trope so much. And I don't know if this is going to be very spicy or not. I'll let you know as I like start to get into it. But so far it seems like it's going to be a really interesting read. I'm excited to kind of like dive into this story and basically just wrap up this challenge with a really cute, uplifting type of a read. Some of the books that we read in this 24-hour reading challenge were a little bit dark, a little bit down. There was a little bit of like bad drama happening in all the other books that I read. So maybe we'll get like a really cute, like quirky love story rom-com out of this last one and just kind of like end this 24 hours on a good note. So I'm going to stop talking and get back to reading. Guys, we are at 21 hours and 7 minutes into our 24-hour reading challenge, and I am so enjoying this book, Best Served Hot. It is hilarious. I am 35% of the way through, and I'm reading it on my Kindle. I actually borrowed this from the library. My library is part of the Libby app, so I can just go in, run a book, and then if it's compatible with my Kindle, then I can read it on my Kindle, which is really fun. And you guys, it's so funny. So in this book, Best Served Hot by Amanda Elliott, we are following basically 2 food critics that are like rivals of one another. So the girl's name is Julia and the guy is Bennett. So Julia really wants to be this like well-renowned food critic, and she applies for this job. She ends up not getting it, and then it goes to Bennett. Well, they end up meeting at this like food festival, and there's this like big like fight showdown that like happens where they're like yelling at each other. It's like not being very nice to each other. Well, the whole thing gets filmed, and then Julie puts it on her social media because she's like a social media like food review critic. And then Bennett works for this like newspaper and does like all of his food reviews like on this like newspaper that's in New York. Well, it ends up like going a completely different direction because they like had this fight, and then it goes on social media. Bennett's work at the newspaper ends up contacting Julia, and then they form this like alliance where they go and review like different restaurants together. I will add that I absolutely love this book. I was actually like dying of laughter in my bed last night as I was reading through this. It just has so many hilarious moments because they like have to go to these restaurants and review them together, but because there's bad blood, they won't look at one another, and they just like continue to say like mean things to one another and just like poke fun at the other person. So it's just like, I don't know, this whole enemies to lovers trope is by far my favorite, I think, when it comes to romance. So I'm hooked. I love it. And I'm already 35% of the way through, and we have 3 hours left in our reading challenge. So I'm going to finish the rest of the book, and then I'll give you guys my overall review and takeaways, and we'll just summarize everything that we read this week. So let's get back to reading. You guys, we have reached our 24 hours into this reading challenge. Woo! Oh my gosh, you guys, I really thought I was only going to be able to get through 2 books, let alone basically 4. The last book that I was reading, Best Served Hot, I basically made it about like 90% of the way through. But we've already reached the 24 hours, so I put the book down, and yeah, let's get into this 24-hour recap. So, if you remember, we started off this 24-hour reading challenge strong with Fairy Tale by Stephen King, which I read on my beloved Kindle. And Fairy Tale is crazy. It's a really good fantasy. Stephen King is most well known for his horror writing, but he's also a really good writer of just all sorts of fiction, honestly. And I've never read anything by Stephen King, so I wanted to have an open mind going into Fairy Tale. And I really liked it. I think I gave it 4.5 stars, and it had some really great elements of it, of surprise. The plot really started to pick up and become more interesting about 150 to 200-ish pages in, and we are following the story of Charlie, and Charlie is a senior in high school. He basically lives with his dad. It's just him and his dad, and one day he noticed that his neighbor has fallen down and injured himself. So Charlie takes it upon himself to basically assist his neighbor. His neighbor goes to the hospital, and then Charlie becomes his caretaker and takes care of this old man who lives at this like kind of creepy old house at the end of the road. But nonetheless, Charlie really befriends them, and they form a really deep friendship and a really deep bond. From there, the old man ends up passing away and then leaves his entire inheritance and even his dog in his house to Charlie to take over. And that is really where the story starts to pick up. And Charlie ends up finding that there is a secret world hidden underneath this shed in the backyard of this old man's house. So he goes into the shed, and there's like a spiral staircase that goes down into this unseen world. And that's really where the adventure picks up, and then Charlie is thrown into very Fairy Tale-esque like plots. He has to become the man of the hour. He has to save basically an entire country. He has to rise to the occasion and be the bigger person and take care of others. And the challenges keep growing in difficulty of things that he has to overcome. And I just got totally sucked in for the last like third of the book. I could not put it down. I thought it was really engaging. I love the story writing. I will say though that the first like 150 to 200 pages did deter me a little bit. I thought I was going to potentially DNF it at one point because it took a really long time for it to basically build that like prologue or like backlog to the story before it really started to pick up. But I really enjoyed it. So 4.5 stars I think is a very worthy rating for this book, and would definitely recommend it if you like fiction or more fantasy type stories. I think it is a great read. Then after that, we moved on to literary fiction with Hello Beautiful by Ann Napolitano. This book follows multiple sisters in a family set in Chicago during the 1970s and 80s, and even beyond then. And we're kind of following the different choices that they've made with their lives and how that has impacted their overall family structure and even between like themselves as sisters. So we're also following one of the husbands to the sisters in this book. He's kind of like our 5th main character, if you will. And I didn't particularly like this book, honestly. I really enjoyed the writing. I thought the prose was really beautiful, and I thought the story had a lot of potential. However, it was very depressing. It was really sad. There's a lot of like dark in kind of like modern topics with like mental health issues and depression, that sort of thing, that are like outlined in this book. And it just, I don't know, I just got to the point where I was like, I just wanted to be done because it just made my mood feel so down, and I'm not really one for those types of stories. But, you know, maybe this is something you'd be into if you're into literary fiction. You know, comment down below if there's maybe another literary fiction book that's a little bit more uplifting that you think that I would really like, or that you have really enjoyed reading through. So yeah, I ended up giving this like 2.5 stars. I wasn't like too impressed by it, and I was just really glad to have it like be done by the end. The third book in our reading challenge was The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. This is a thriller with a little bit of like a horror element to it, and it was amazing. I read this whole thing in like maybe a day, day and a half of just sitting down. I went to a coffee shop and read it, and it's fantastic. This thriller is so like gripping. It pulls you in right from the very beginning. We are following our main character, Casey. Casey is essentially like a washed up actress, and she ends up going to this lake house that her family owns to kind of recover from some like paparazzi drama that has recently happened in her life. At the lake house, she noticed that a woman is drowning and goes and saves this woman, who basically ends up being her new neighbor. Her neighbor and her husband are very wealthy and well-to-do, and they live in this house that's like directly like across from Casey's lake house. And it's precariously like positioned because she ends up like spying on them and starts to form these like speculations about the couple. She really thinks that the husband is out to kill the wife because of things that she sees. Meanwhile, Casey is like totally like caught up in her own issues. She has a drinking problem, and it basically consumes her. And a lot of the other people in her life don't really seem that she's very credible because she's basically drunk off her butt the whole time. But it gets really, really good. There's a couple of plot twists that I won't spoil, but just kept me reeling, and I didn't see them coming at all whatsoever, and it was really, really good. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. I thought this was fantastic, amazing. This was probably the best thriller I've read in a little bit of time, so I definitely would recommend it. It was so, so good. And then our very last book, if you recall, is Best Served Hot by Amanda Elliott. And I am currently 92% of the way through this book. I absolutely adore it. It's a really good rom-com. It's about these two food critics that live in New York City, and they are rivals to one another. They end up forming this like mutual like professional relationship where they end up going to these different restaurants to like critique and review them together. But of course, it's a rom-com, so of course, you know, there's bad blood between them. They're always like jabbing at one another. There's really good banter. It's overall just like very endearing and like hilarious to like read through. And it's a very good, light and easy read, and a really great way to end up this 24-hour reading challenge. That's it for today's video. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. And you guys, thank you so much for tuning in and watching today's video. I love you all so much, and I'll see you in the next one.